Okay, so what we're looking at here is actually a lot of stuff that you probably have already had. Maybe you need a refresher on it, but stuff from civics and economics. In the first part of civics, you kind of talk about the establishment of the Constitution. So you're probably going to see a lot of familiar information here. What we're looking at are when all of these individuals come together in Philadelphia, and you have 55 delegates who are coming together to discuss amending the Articles of Confederation, but as we know, they're going to move to scrap it and actually start something else. The makeup of these people is very important. A lot of them are conservatives. Most of them favors a stronger government. There is also a large number of lawyers and merchants, shippers, land speculators, and moneylenders. And of course, what this means is that the people who are going to be creating this new government are fairly well off financially speaking. These are people who are not really in debt, and therefore their interests will be quite different from a very large number of Americans. The other thing is that they are nationalists, meaning that they are concerned with preserving this republic. But democracy, on the other hand, popular democracy, this is something that they are scared of. They saw what happened with Shays' Rebellion. They know that as the wealthy merchants and moneylenders and such, that people like Daniel Shays, what they call the mob, could potentially, overthrow them and even kill them. And, especially when the French Revolution begins, a lot of these people are very concerned that things could kind of go overseas and, people like Daniel Shays could see what was happening and perhaps follow suit. So what they're really looking at here is how to preserve the republic, but at the same time somewhat take power away from the mob for fear of what happened with Daniel Shays. And so what they want to do is they want to first make sure that the U.S. government, this new government, can stand up to countries like France and Spain and Britain. And remember, the Spanish are kind of cutting off control of the Mississippi River. The British still have frontier forts. And the U.S. appears weak abroad, and they want to create a firm government that can deal with foreign countries, but at the same time can also keep events like Shays' Rebellion from happening again. The other thing is they want the ability to control commerce and collect taxes, and a central government was necessary to do both of these things. What they also want to do is make sure that if something like Shays' Rebellion were to happen again, that they could stop one of these uprisings, and that there could be a central government that could, form an army that could march into another state and put it down. Because remember, Shays' Rebellion is in Massachusetts, and there wasn't any authority to send troops into Massachusetts. It basically had to be troops from Massachusetts. So what you're going to see here is that basically they come together and they decide that the best thing to do is to scrap the Articles of Confederation instead of revising them. And from there, what they'll do is they will begin looking at other options for a new federal government. And what we have here are two proposals, the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. The Virginia Plan is the large state plan, representation in a bicameral House, so a Senate and a House, and it would be based on population, which of course is what they want because they're a larger state, therefore they would have a larger population and get more representation, more power, more influence. The New Jersey Plan is a small state plan. They want a unicameral legislation, and it has equal representation regardless of size. So, each state would have 1 or 2 delegates or something like that. It didn't matter how big or small they were. And so this becomes the major debate in this Philadelphia conference about which plan should we go with, how should we divvy up power, and what we'll end up seeing is what is known as the Great Compromise. And pretty much what they decide is that we will have a bicameral legislature. Larger states get representation by population in the House. smaller states will have equal representation in the Senate. And they all agree that tax bills or revenue measures must originate in the House, where population counted more heavily, as kind of a way to hopefully kind of counteract the powers there of maybe some of the smaller states. And remember, what will happen here with the Senate, too, is that senators will actually be appointed by legislatures. They will not be elected directly, which is kind of a big deal. So this great compromise gets past the two plans. And then what we're looking at also here is that they want to make sure that the laws here are flexible enough that, as the country changes, the Constitution can move with it. And to me, this is probably one of the most amazing things about the Constitution, is that these guys were so forward-thinking that they understood that the country would evolve. And the Constitution had to be able to kind of move with that evolution. And so this kind of Anglo-American common law legal tradition, which said that you didn't necessarily have to have, these specific things about everything, would basically accommodate the changing country and the changing Constitution. Now, of course, this is where we'll start to see people become uneasy. They want certain things spelled out, and this will lead to, of course, the Bill of Rights. In this new Constitution, they established the role of a president, which was the executive. They were given authority to make appointments to domestic offices, including judges. They could veto legislation as part of that checks and balances. They had to get approval from Congress to wage war. And basically, once again, we're looking here about ways to kind of curb power because they're still somewhat afraid that centralized power unchecked could lead to what they saw with Britain. But what they do is they set up the Electoral College as a system to kind of override the mob, if necessary, as they choose to elect who the president is. So as opposed to direct means, it'll go through the Electoral College. Now, larger states have the advantage in terms of that the electors are based on the total of its senators and representatives in Congress, and smaller states would gain a larger voice if no candidate got a majority of electoral votes and the election went to the House of Reps. And, of course, this doesn't really happen often. Basically, it happens in 1800 and 1824. So the larger states kind of win out in terms of the Electoral College here. The other thing that happens is, and that's very important, is the slavery issue. Because what happens here is the southern states obviously have a large number of slaves. And what's happening is that the North is, looking at this saying, well, you can't have these slaves represented as people. And the South, which is ironic because, of course, the South, considers them property for the most part, but they say, yes, they should be represented. And so what they come up with is a compromise called the 3/5 compromise, and they literally take a slave as 3/5 of a person, as ridiculous as that sounds. They also state that the slave trade could continue until the end of 1807, aka we're going to put it off until we're too old to deal with it, and we'll leave it to the next group. Okay, the other thing that's happening here is these safeguards that they put in. Economically speaking, they want to try to eliminate, each state having their own money. They also know, we talked about with Shays' Rebellion, the issue of the paper money not really being worth anything. And so one of the things, too, here that they're going to be looking at is, having a currency that is stable and that is backed. The other thing is we have a strong central government with three branches that will check each other in power. And what they will also do is rejected manhood suffrage democracy. So you have to remember here is what they're looking at is, we want to ensure that, yes, there is a republic in place, but at the same time, they really want to make sure that they are not being overruled by what they call the mob. Okay, some other things here that are kind of important, especially is that not everybody is going to be on board with this thing. There will be people who will not sign the Constitution because they don't agree with it. This is going to lead to a battle between what become known as the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And what you'll see here is that Federalists will support a strong central government. Guys like George Washington, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton will be Federalists. The Anti-Federalists on the other side of this are going to be guys like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. They are scared of this centralized authority. They want power to remain in the hands of the states, and they are also concerned because there are no explicit protections for individuals in the Constitution at the time. And so what you'll see here is that as this battle between the two sides continues, the Federalists are going to actually create what are known as the Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers will be documents that will be used to try to argue in support of the Constitution and argue for, having this kind of stronger power here. As these battles continue between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, you'll see that several states will kind of hold out. Virginia, New York, North Carolina, Rhode Island will kind of eventually sign it. Rhode Island, North Carolina will kind of be the two holdouts out of all of them.